Hey, skills champions. It's Rachel Unruh at National Skills Coalition here again this week with Katie Spiker for Skills on the Hill. Obviously, some big things happened this week in DC with the Senate passing their infrastructure bill. So we're going to talk about what's in that bill, what's not in that bill, and what happens next. So Katie, from a skills perspective, what made it into the final bill that the Senate passed?
So the Senate, as you mentioned, passed their bipartisan infrastructure bill this week. There are some provisions in the bill that would fund workers' access to digital skills, consistent with Senator Murray and Portman's Bipartisan Digital Equity Act, for which our network and our partners have been advocating over the past few months. This means that there will be funding that goes out to states as well as competitive grants out to local partnerships to help support workers' access to digital skills. Workforce programs and organizations are required partners in some of these grants. And so there's this intentional alignment between people being able to gain occupational digital skills and digital skills more broadly.
Great. And so that's a significant win. What didn't make it into the bill from a skills perspective?
Everything else. So other than the Digital Equity Act, though, the bill really leaves out the investments in workers that we've been advocating for and that businesses really need workers to have access to skills for. And this is despite the thousands of NSC partners that have done outreach over the past couple of months, had meetings, sent letters, including just last week, where almost 2,000 folks from our network sent messages up to the Senate to urge them to pass a provision that would expand access to Pell Grants for high quality short-term programs. Even though the bill didn't include these investments in workforce that we've been advocating for, that momentum is still really important. And the advocacy that folks have been doing is going to carry over as we look to some of the next work that's going to happen, starting in the House and then turning to the Senate.
So what is some of that work that's going to happen next, and you know, where will that momentum from our network be important?
So the other big thing that happened this week was that the Senate passed what's called a budget justification. It gives instructions to each committee about the amount of money that they can spend under the reconciliation process, which is the Dem-led, Dem-only process by which they can pass and fund, provide additional funding to a variety of programs. And after nearly a year and a half of advocating for investments in skills and without seeing meaningful investments across any of the previous stimulus or economic recovery or response packages from Congress, there was included in these instructions an instruction to the committees that have jurisdiction over workforce programs that some of their funding needs to go support workforce development and job training. So that means that the Senate Health Committee and the House Education and Labor Committees are required to spend some of their allocation under the reconciliation package on investments in workforce development, career and technical education, and adult education. The committees were also instructed to fund a bunch of other programs that have been part of some of the advocacy that we've been working on and that our partners are working on. So other programs that were listed in these really brief instructions include the proposals for free community college, expanded access to early childhood education and childcare, and other pieces that we saw proposed from the administration in their American Jobs Plan and America's Family Plan. What's still up in the air, though, even though we know that there will be some investments in workforce development broadly, is exactly where these investments will go and the amount of those investments. The committees have until September 15th to put together that legislation and to figure out how this 10 years of funding that is included in this budget justification and the reconciliation process, the amounts of that funding for each program and how that funding will be spent. So they have about a month to make those decisions that are going to impact the funding levels that programs across the country have for the next decade. Obviously, right now is a critical time for advocacy.
So I just want to stop for a second and reiterate what you just said, because I don't know that it's universally understood how important the next month is. There's a lot of process moments over the course of the next year, and a lot of them will be important, but this next one is really important. So what you're saying, Katie, is that between now and September 15th, the language that the committees craft will impact funding levels for workforce programs for the next decade. That's huge.
It's huge.
So what are the remaining process steps after that?
So the House, just to show how important and how much work they're trying to get done, is coming back early from their August recess. They're coming back a week early, August 23rd, to kick off that drafting and decision-making process. Really, they've been, because we've known that this process was coming, they've started some of the early work on this, but now that they have their allocations that each committee can spend, now's when they're actually deciding how much should go to each of the programs that are under their jurisdiction. Once the House passes that reconciliation bill, and they have until, like I said, September 15th to put that language together, then the House will combine all of the committee's different bills, bring it to the floor, vote on it, and it'll get kicked over to the Senate, who will likely pass it. And once the House passes that bill, that's when they're likely to turn back to the infrastructure bill that we saw pass the Senate this week. So it's really over the next month that all of those decisions are going to be getting made, starting with the work coming out of the House and then turning to passage in the Senate.
So what can our skills champions be doing during that critical time over the next month to make sure that skills are a part of these investments?
So members of Congress need to hear that investments in skills are critical to workers and businesses across the country, and they need to hear that repeatedly and in as many different ways as we can ensure that they do. So one step that folks can do is sign on to a letter that we're circulating with the Campaign to Invest in America's Workforce and some of our other national organization partners, calling for that $100 billion of investment in skills that we saw proposed from the President in the American Jobs Plan. So folks can both sign on to that letter and circulate it to your network so that we can expand the number of organizations that are signing on to and showing the breadth and depth of support for this issue. We're also organizing a parallel letter for businesses and industry associations so that members of Congress can see the support for businesses in investing in workforce development and skills. Separately, we're organizing Hill visits, particularly focusing on members who are on those important committees that are going to be making decisions and other decision makers in Congress, to make sure that they hear from folks across the country about the importance of investing in skills over the next few weeks. Many of the folks listening and in our network may have already received outreach from folks on staff, so we can really leverage and provide capacity to make it as easy as possible for folks to reach out to tell their members the importance of these investments over the next couple of weeks.
Great. It sounds like there's a lot that folks can be doing over the next month to really have an impact on this stage of the process. And of course, we're going to be coming back throughout the year at every stage. Well, thanks, Katie. And of course, we'll be back again next week to let folks know what's happening with Skills on the Hill. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Rachel.